Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Flinchbaugh, host of People Solve Problems, and today we have a special guest, Jason Trujillo. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Jamie? It's great to see
Um,
you.
it's great to see you. Really happy to have you on. A little bit of a background. Jason's a multifaceted leader, a broad and diverse career that spans Stanley Black& and Decker, IBM, Intel, Harley Davidson, some real, names everyone will recognize, and great blue chip names. If someone sees problems as opportunities, uses problem solving as the key to success in any endeavor, and we've known each other, never had a chance to work deeply together, but crossed paths a few times and had a few conversations. So I'm looking forward to this one.
As am I. Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're very much a learner. I know that much about you. I want to kind of start with how do you approach exploring, experimenting with integrating new problem solving techniques, methods, or even mindsets into uh, your your skill set, your perspective.
It's a good one. When we were catching up, or when I was thinking about what the heck kind of bio should Jamie use for me, I think I mentioned that I started my engineering studies actually in art school. So that it really was the seed for a lot of the learning and exploration and heck, even trying to figure out what the heck problem solving even was. Um, and I find that that sort of start of my journey just has become a bit of a center of gravity. So, exploring new problems, being in new situations, it all kind of comes back to, hey, how do it's a creative process. What am I looking at? What does that mean? What can I do with it? How can you play with it? All of those sort of come into being, and I've been able to fall back on it time and time again. But then, really, as you start studying and all of a sudden you find, geez, what you thought was going to be your first GOOD job, get out of debt, turns into a 10-year journey. Um, it's an opportunity to really kind of take a step back and say, hey, what are the things that really, what sticks with you, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And I guess over time, what I really gravitated towards is, I'm just a sucker for a good framework because, those heuristics, those frameworks, rubrics are just really good ways to make sure that you're being intentional about what are you doing? What are you working on? How are you framing a given problem or approaching uh, a collaborative event, a conversation, a hard problem? And with those frames, it sort of gives you the guide rails, the fences within which you can then be creative, but make sure that you're not just laying on the ground and staring in the sky, ideating, but instead, using broad perspective, uh, provocative, forcing functions, and really testing yourself, your thinking, or the folks that you're working with to make sure that you're really getting at, be it root cause problems or the insight that you're trying to uncover. And so it is the nice thing about that is that it's not a process per se. Certainly
Yeah.
not step by step by step, because very rarely do you land on the right process that actually solves whatever particular problem you're facing.
Yeah. Just I don't think we were really planning on going down this thread, but I am curious about the art school experience. I like to say that good creativity comes from having constraints. And I'm more talking about problem solving in that regard, but my perspective is also not being an artist, that the same having constraints leads to creativity and art. And you find, with your background and education, bridging those worlds, do you find that that's true? And does it matter where the constraints come from or how we think about them?
It's definitely true. What I think is also true is that most young artists or people who are just sort of heading down this path, uh, always want to rebel against those constraints. You're not my real dad. You can't tell me what. Only to find that there are few things harder to deal with than a blank sheet of paper or a blank canvas or an open space.
Yep.
So when you can get over those components, then yeah, I think constraints are absolutely critical. I think it is either intentionally or unintentionally uh, really the method that a lot of art instruction, be it formal art school or anybody trying to teach or learn a specific medium, approach, genre, they really do break down the problem of learning the skill of art by constraints,
Hmm.
right? Uh, we're either going to work this size, or we're going to work with this kind of material, or we're going to, you know, artificially, intentionally define the boundaries. This subject, uh, this process. It is, I think, it it really is necessary. Otherwise, it becomes overwhelming, and that's where I think the analogies between art or really any creative process and problem solving are spot on, right? I
Yeah.
mean, fix the company, fix that machine, fix the broken is no way to actually arrive at a solution. Instead, you got to segment that problem. You got to be specific, um, and um, and in general, define a specific problem
Yeah.
ultimately, and
Right.
that it becomes the same with the creative process. And in fact, I don't consider myself an artist. So I went to art school.
Yeah.
The best thing that happened to me there is I met the woman that would become my wife. So Kelly, my wife, is a painter. When we flipped the coin, I lost, so I had to go get the real job, and she continued on in art. Um, but she was talking about her process, uh, and it just PDCA in different words kind of came right out of her mouth.
Yeah.
Hers is observe, visualize, decide, and act, which I thought it's just a domain mapping of all the lessons we know in problem solving, uh, applied to painting. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's spot on, and I also think you there are still frameworks, the critique process and experimentation and building models, all of those things, very much, for me, were first instilled and grounded in those early studies.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Um, so coming back to the world of sort of transforming companies, and you've worked with some big ones, and your job has been transformation, right? It's been, not in every role, but you certainly spent a lot of time. My job is to transform an enterprise, which means the entire company is your sandbox and every problem is fair game.
Yep.
So in doing that, in that type of a role, how do you decide what your role is? How much are you the problem solver, the instigator, the coach, the facilitator? Where do you put your role in? Is it situation dependent or is it uh, time frame dependent? Is it you just follow your own passion? How do you figure that out?
Uh, I guess the answer yes isn't the most useful. But context is always king, right? I mean, I've got a few mantras that I live by, and one is don't solve general problems because nobody has a general problem.
Hmm.
Everybody has a specific problem. So, you know, the start is always really what's the pain point? What's the problem? What are the steps you need to take to get to a specific problem statement? But, in a change agent or transformation role, you really do have to wear all those hats, and sometimes it's just dependent upon what room you're in. Uh, Luckily for me and probably the folks I work with, I'm long since past being the only one that was responsible for solving a problem. Uh, but there are times when I wish it was just me and a microscan stepper, and all I needed to do is figure out how to get it back up and running. Um, and so, in a leadership meeting or when, in my manager's staff meeting, I need to play the role of, accountable owner for whatever the problem is, the approach to that problem. And that becomes a process of aligning objectives to strategies. What's the strategy? Where are we trying to get there? Do we have the operating model to enable it? And then do we have the right people, tools, resources to activate and enable that operating model? All the things that come with that. Here's the goal, here's the target,
Hmm.
be the KPIs or OSRs or OKRs or whatever TLA is in vogue these days. And so there, I think it is much more of there are times, especially in those executive meetings, where folks just want the answer. Uh, and oftentimes my role is to not give them an answer intentionally, either because need to buy some time or because they're just trying to jump to solution. Or, if the team's already worked and we're in execution mode, then articulating what that answer is and connecting it to that context.
Hmm.
But outside of that, almost always my role is coach, guide, enabler, supporter of helping others try and solve those problems.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, it is, it's a much more rewarding space to be because you get to see folks learn and develop and then, execute and win. And boy, everybody likes to win. Doesn't happen as often as everybody assumes that it does, but that's what makes it even sweeter. But yeah, it is ultimately, I think, certainly the past, I don't know, certainly few roles, few decades, it's really been about myself trying to build my own capability to help people learn, uh, problem solve, uh, and build capability.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So let me tie that, where you're helping others, it's sort of their gap, right? And that's always, their gap. But I'm curious if you find sometimes their ambition isn't what you want it to be and how you resolve that. Let me sort of put some more words around that, right? If we define a problem as a gap, there's the direction of that gap, but there's also the magnitude, right? How far do you want to go? And sometimes as the coach or the help or the instigator, our ambition about how big that gap is, the magnitude of the gap might be more ambitious than the person we're working with or the team. They might want to just get through the day and move on to the next thing. So how do you spot those differences? How do you perceive them? How do you overcome them when maybe someone's ambition about how far they should be pursuing things isn't as far as you think it should be?
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, because I think so much of being an effective coach or leader is really making sure that you listen, understand, and really get into an empathetic space with the folks that you're in so that you can understand that. Like,
Hmm.
is the gap, is it a knowledge gap? Is it an ambition gap? Is it what actually is it? And so, I mean, for me, I have to segment that problem because just not enough. It's easy to uh, point at the gap. Hey, the goal is X. You think you can achieve Y. There's a difference between those two that we need to resolve that.
Hmm.
The resolution there is there's a million paths, an infinite number of things that could be behind it. So when I find myself in a knowledge gap, hey, they don't understand, they don't know how, they aspire, hey, I want to hit that goal, but I don't know how. The approach to helping them learn that is very different. Um, if it's a motivation gap, I don't know, that takes us to an entirely different podcast. Uh, so maybe not go too far down that road, but it is oftentimes I try and help my team and talk about it in terms of either elevation or altitude. They like we're pointed in the right direction, we're working on the right thing, but we're just flying at the wrong altitude.
Hmm.
If we lift up a little higher, you're going to see a totally different perspective. Um, and that perspective oftentimes can help folks overcome either anxiety or frustration you know uh, or the I mean where I thought you were going initially, and maybe it is, so I'll go there regardless. There are times when folks are reporting out, especially in very technical teams, right?
Hmm.
Software or hardware, whatever, any kind of engineer. When I find folks really triggering my own engineering brain, that's when I have to uh, double check and make sure that I'm flying at the right altitude
Yeah.
because they're articulating the problem, but it's at such a low level of detail or specificity that it it just doesn't become relevant to the scope or magnitude or the business problem that's at hand.
Right.
And that can be a source of frustration and demotivation for a lot of engineers
Hmm.
or technical minded folks. Um, but you can still use that engineering brain at a higher altitude. And it's interesting to watch how those engineering brains really start chunking on the problem at a different scope when you can get them in that space of, hey, we're actually flying at an entirely different altitude, and therefore we have to approach it differently.
Yeah. That's great. And yeah, it's really kind of building the bus while you're driving it, right? Kind of evaluating are you even still working on the right problem?
Yep.
Uh, yeah, as we're kind of running out of time, let me just ask about the other end of problem solving, sort of more now that you know the scope and do some other work, you start ideation, you start brainstorming. How do you generally like to approach that, whether you're facilitating or coaching, or maybe you own the problem yourself, that important role of ideation?
Yeah. Um, you touch on this in your book, which I enjoyed immensely, by the way.
Thank you.
Well done. I think it might be our unique segment of the spectrum where we share, but just really delving into problem solving as a topic was a lot of fun. Um, and so the reason I mentioned that is that you touch on this as well. I mean, I used to be really triggered by brainstorming, and instead of just being the curmudgeon, no, we're not going to brainstorm. I realized, hey, I need to unpack this. Why am I triggered anytime somebody wants to brainstorm? And I think for me, what it is that, hey, let's get together, talk about all the different solutions that we have, and then vote on the one that will, appease the loudest voice in the room, or
Right.
get us out of the meeting as quickly as possible, or whatever. It just there's not a lot of value in that for me, because it's not problem solving. So
Mm.
what I like to do is really it's again maybe coming back to uh, the appreciation of frameworks. So there's so many opportunities to utilize frameworks to really structure an ideation session.
Yep.
Um, and so first and foremost, I want to make sure that I'm thinking about the approach we're using. Are we looking for divergent ideas? Do we want to expand our horizon? But I think you framed us as, hey, we've been there. Now we need to actually start to converge. How are we going to select the plan, the action, the answer? And um, different frameworks help you achieve those ends, um, because, as I'm sure you found, there's no quicker way to piss off a room full of people than to throw out yet one more idea when you're in the 11th hour and almost to conclusion. So, frameworks that enable people to know what they're getting into, know what the expected outcome is, and either prepare up front. And sometimes it is, this is what I expect you to bring into the session, or prepare them for the exercise that will get us to the specific components that can then be evaluated in a structured way, right? And again, another infinite area of selection of things, tools that you might use to actually select those. But if each step in that process is really taking you a little bit closer to that point of convergence of, hey, here's our specific problem statement or hypothesis, and here's the specific actions we're going to take on it, then you've turned an ideation session into a constructive planning session that enables you to get to action.
Yeah.
Either I'm going to think differently after this, or I'm going to do something differently after this. But if it's, summarize, collect, and get the gold star, then there should be another name for that, and I'm sure there is, but let's not call it that. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Jason, for coming on, sharing your experience and perspective. If I take a lesson away from this, maybe to summarize all of your input throughout, it's to ask the question before the question and to be deliberate and thoughtful in your approach. And so I thank you for sharing ways in which people can do that. So
Uh, Thanks for the insight that I provided. I will take that away as well. And yeah, always a pleasure, Jamie. Look forward to the next time when chance or circumstance brings us back together, and we'll talk soon.
very good.
Be well.